So this week, a new Switch 2 release from Nintendo itself. We have, is it Drag X Drive? Is that the correct pronunciation there, Tom?
I think some people are calling it Drag and Drive, which,
right.
Yeah, but I think you can be forgiven for either, really. Yeah.
Well, I'm using this thing called reading.
Oh, yeah.
Where is the and symbol?
I know.
Okay, what are you going with here?
I'll go with Drag X Drive, just because it's the way it's written. Okay. But hey, just to get it out there in case we get called out on that.
Okay, so this has been an interesting thing, right? Because it's one of the few Nintendo releases, first-party Nintendo releases I've seen for quite some time where there hasn't been like resounding praise for what has been delivered here. I'm curious what your impressions are there, Tom.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't get to cover this one at the London preview event back before the Switch 2 launch. I think we gave it a miss. There were just higher priority things. There was Cyberpunk and all the rest there. But we finally got code in, and I think you kind of have to measure expectations going into this one. I think the best way to describe it would be, imagine those, the Wii Sports mini games of the Wii launch. It feels like one game out of a batch that has been kind of embellished a bit, made into its own thing, but not terribly much so. It costs $19, £17. So it's a very small sort of scale project. And they've had a shot at basically taking the opportunity to make a case for their Joy-Con mouse controls. And I think the most exciting part of this is literally that there's a dual mouse control scheme here, which we don't have conventionally on PC. We have one mouse, obviously. So Switch 2 can innovate in this one space by having two sides kind of rolling forward or backwards on a flat surface. So that's an interesting concept, and they've kind of worked with it. It's Rocket League-esque, it's fair to say. You're in this kind of basketball half-pipe area. It's a giant hub that you basically load into where you can access all these mini-games, the main courts as well, and there's room for, it's 3v3. I played against CPU, which goes up to like level 9. And there's online play as well, but notably without sort of leaderboards or sort of progression there. That seems to satisfy a lot of people. So it's fairly bare bones, it's fair to say. The mini games around the outskirts are fun, but they're more like a glorified tutorial. And the rest is like, okay, you're just playing 3v3. And the good news is that it is fun. The mechanics are well worked. It is innovative. The bad news for me is I found it quite fatiguing after a while, like having two hands on Joy-Cons rolling forward constantly.
Right, okay. Mm-hmm.
I think that's maybe a problem that's... Yeah, I mean, there's a small handful of titles which are going to support mouse controls, like Metroid Prime 4. And the question that hangs over that is whether it's going to be viable for the long-term, long play sessions. It may be different for you. Honestly, it may be a matter of getting used to. I'm willing to accept that. But it's also clear you will need to adjust to it. And ergonomically, I think the Joy-Con, it's rather thin and small compared to a regular mouse, which has been designed for, a proper grasp from a regular-sized hand. So that is a problem that's almost impossible to overcome. It's just a very tiny, thin thing. In terms of the tech, it's as straightforward as can be. I think there's a lot of parallels with Nintendo doesn't really release its engine names. There's no like Unreal or anything. Like, it's just, here's a game, it runs on a engine. But it does look an awful lot like Splatoon in terms of the way the assets are generated, the look of materials. The big difference there being it's got a distinctly less vivid color palette. It's very muted, lots of dark grays and blacks and chrome materials, rubber. So it's immediately a lot more clinical than you'd expect a typical Nintendo game to be, which is full of color and charm. There's some customization in there, but it's fairly minor stuff, and you're still lacking character, which you'd usually associate with a Nintendo game. Yeah, image quality, 1440p, well docked, 1080p, portable. It's using basically no anti-aliasing. Surprise, surprise.
Right. Yeah, that's not great, is it? And FSR1, by the look of it, based on some of the declarations.
Yeah. Yeah, FSR1 is in there.
Within the game itself.
Interestingly, SMAA also further down the intellectual properties page. So there is...
Right.
Doesn't really look it, though.
No.
Wild.
No, so it's spatial upscaling, basically, and that's kind of your lot. Maybe some image enhancements, but it's just... There's not a lot going on there. And, frame rate wise, this is a locked 60. I mean, I don't think any of us expected it to be anything otherwise. It's so simplistic. There's just 3v3 in a very barren sort of lap-like area. There's not much to really talk on there.
Yeah, we did check for 120 FPS support, but it's not there.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, I mean, I like the look of it. I think it's a great sort of pack-in game. It would be a great pack-in game, but it's not been released as such. There's some nice materials in there. Like there's a good sense of gloss on helmets, a matte finish on metals. Some of the thoughts I had going through it, but in typical Nintendo fashion, that keeps the game language very easy to read. But yeah, again, there's not really much there that we haven't seen on Nintendo Switch.
How does this mouse mechanic work in mobile mode? Because obviously you can't really use it there. Is it just like go back to the sticks?
No, that's the thing. There's only this way to play Joy-Cons. You've got to pull out the Joy-Cons, sit your Switch 2 in tablet mode in front of you with the stand kicked up, and just use the Joy-Cons on the map as you would normally. So there's no alternative control button-based scheme for putting those commands in, which is, to be fair, kind of for the competitive balance online. If people had an option to just use buttons there, then I think everyone just would, because it's more immediate.
Ringing endorsement.
What you mean, the more accessible and easier control method. People would be too tempted to use it.
Yeah.
Wow. Oliver, what do you think about this?
Well, it's pretty unexciting from a lot of perspectives, because it's like no AA or minimal AA, maybe SMAA in there, but not a real passive, any kind of like temporal anti-aliasing or DLSS. It's using FSR1 for upscaling. It's like 60 FPS and 1440p docked and 60 FPS and 1080p portable. That's like kind of a greatest hits for Nintendo software and Switch 2 so far. It's
Yes,
like
for sure.
Everything Nintendo tends to do in just one title. The exact same thing, pretty much. I mean, the exact same thing as we've seen across a variety of Nintendo software and Switch 2, especially like kind of Switch 1 era kind of visual Nintendo software, ports, enhancements, certainly what we see from there, like Switch 2 editions rather, of the Legend of Zelda titles, things like that. So it's nothing extraordinary technically. One thing that's kind of interesting though is they kind of have this like very uniform lighting presentation where there's like no appearance of like multiple point lights or anything, because obviously they're trying to emulate a basketball court, but it's kind of like the whole thing's being lit by just one uniform light source. That's a little bit bizarre. But yeah, this seems a lot like all the other Nintendo Switch 2 software. I'm still waiting for that, barnstorming, ray tracing, DLSS title from Nintendo, PVR, all the good stuff. We may have to wait a while to see that, unfortunately.
Yeah, I guess the thing is, I'm looking at all of the aliasing and artifacting issues here in Tom's B-roll, and you just think to yourself, DLSS would have cleared up a lot of this kind of continual form of bafflement as to why it's not in there. And I guess we're still stuck with the potential explanation that John had that possibly there's not motion vector support in there. But even so, the system's been in development for so long, you can't help but think that perhaps these engines could have been reconfigured to support this game-changing technology that's been added to it. Just a thought. I think, it's interesting, Tom, you talked about the fact that we saw it at the event, but we didn't actually play it. And I think that's sort of the main problem here, is that there isn't really that sort of Nintendo charm. Basically, you look at a Nintendo game, you kind of want to play it, and that was kind of not what we experienced with this one.
Yeah, they had an opportunity to even throw in just like the standard roster of Mario characters, right? But they went for these very plain looking, robot type characters, and it's not quite got that Nintendo feel to it. If they really wanted to embellish it, they could have gone the ARMS route. ARMS was superb on Switch. Had a great similar idea where it's like, okay, let's try something new. Let's mess with the conventions that we're used to in a fighting game, make it a kind of front on. And they created a whole roster of characters which suited that. But here it's just kind of very, very plain.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see whether they actually evolve this game over time, because I think the single sort of big feedback point in the reviews is that there's just kind of like a lack of content, right?
Yeah, just the 3v3, the mini games, and some unlockable stuff. Like that's really all that's going to keep you for. But then it's only $20, so I guess it's all relative.